Law 3. Separation is administrative, not psychological. We are dealing with veterans, not procedures. With their problems, not ours. General Omar N. Bradley, First Administrator of the Veterans Administration. The US military is the most effective human engineering system ever built. That is not propaganda. That is a design fact. The system takes a civilian, a person with no discipline and no frame of reference, no understanding of what they are capable of. And in roughly 10 weeks, it produces a warrior, a defender. The Marines do it in 13. The Navy and Air Force do it in 8 to 10. In less time than it takes most people to finish an online certificate, the military takes a human being apart at the molecular level and reassembles them into something harder, faster, and more dangerous than what walked in the door. And the person who does this is not a therapist, not a counsellor, not a civilian contractor reading from a PowerPoint deck. It is a drill sergeant, DS. Other branches call them drill instructors. Same job, different title. A senior non-commissioned officer, NCO, who has been screened, selected, trained and certified to do one of the most psychologically demanding jobs in the military. The DS does not lecture you about the Army values. The DS is the Army values. The DS does not explain what discipline looks like. The DS demonstrates it, enforces it, and embeds it into your nervous system through weeks of relentless, deliberately engineered psychological pressure. When a drill sergeant told you to shut up and listen, you shut up and listened. Not because of their rank, but because you knew, on a level deeper than thought, that this person had been where you were going and had survived it. That credibility is not a nice to have, it is the mechanism. Without it, the words are just words. That is the investment the system makes in turning you into a warrior. Now, let me tell you about the investment it makes in turning you back. The Transition Assistance Programme, TAP, is the system's answer. On paper, it is comprehensive. A mandatory interagency programme led by the Department of War with the VA, Department of Labour, SBA, and Department of Education all playing supporting roles. Individualised counselling. Pre-separation briefings. A multi-day workshop covering financial planning, benefits navigation, and career translation. 2-day tracks in employment, education, vocational training, or entrepreneurship. It begins no later than 365 days before your separation date. On paper, that 365-day mandate is real. Title 10 US Code requires it, but the law and the reality of military manning operate on different planets. The law says you are transitioning. Your unit still sees you as a billet filler. No backfill arrives until you are actually gone, which means your commander, judged on current readiness, not your future employment, has every incentive to keep you on the line until the last possible day. Skill bridge denied. Networking time denied. The 12-month window exists on paper and evaporates on the ground. What actually happens is a week of PowerPoint taught by civilians in a classroom where half the people are checking their phones and the other half are doing the math on their terminal leave. The mandatory workshop is 3 days. The VA benefits briefing is 1 day. The 2-day track, mandatory for those the system deems high risk, optional for everyone else, brings the total to exactly 6 days. The 12-month rule was never designed to pull you off the line early. It was designed to stop you from being dumped into the civilian world with zero preparation on your final day. Those are 2 very different standards, and the system consistently delivers the lower one. And the people running it are civilians, contractors, in 90% of cases, even the ones who are veterans themselves, and many are, have been stripped of their rank and their voice, replaced by a script they aren't allowed to deviate from. They have been hired to deliver a curriculum, not to lead a transformation. When they stand in front of a room full of combat veterans and read from a PowerPoint deck, the system has already created a credibility gap that no amount of prior service can bridge. They aren't there as your NCOs, they're there as the system's liability write-off. There is no drill sergeant equivalent for transition. There is no senior NCO whose job is to take the person the system spent years building and help them become someone the civilian world can use. The system that understood credibility as the foundation of transformation forgot that principle the moment the transformation needed to go in the other direction. Let me give you the math on my own career, because the numbers are the argument. I spent more than 60 combined months in formal training, 5 years of schools, courses, and qualifications, and the pipeline the system designed to build me into the thing it needed. When it came time to undo all of that, the system invested about a week. Most of it was online. The Army spends 3 weeks at airborne school teaching you how to jump out of a perfectly good airplane. Ground week, tower week, Jump Week. 21 days of training so you can do something that takes roughly 30 seconds. Exit the aircraft, fall, land without breaking yourself, and move to the objective. The system understands that those 30 seconds can kill you if you are not ready, so it invests 3 weeks to make sure you survive them. The transition from military to civilian life, the thing that will define every day of the rest of your existence, gets less time than jump school, less structure, less investment, and no NCOs. The numbers from outside the system confirm what everyone inside it already knows. The GAO, Congress's own watchdog, has reviewed TAP multiple times. In January 2026, it found that 65% of service members did not start TAP on time, as required. Nearly 1/4 of Tier 3 service members, the ones the system itself identified as least prepared, did not attend the mandatory 2-day class. The Department of War was not using its own performance data to understand why or to take corrective action, collecting data and ignoring it. In 2017, the GAO found that the Department of War lacked data for 48% of National Guard and Reserve members. The publicly reported participation rate of 94% for Guard and Reserve may have been as low as 47% when you account for missing data. The system was reporting fabricated success numbers due to omission. Then there is the RAND finding, the one that should have been a 5-alarm fire. RAND's analysis found that TAP was associated with lower wages for program participants, not higher, lower. The program designed to help you transition to civilian employment was correlated with worse outcomes than not participating at all. The intel. Transformation, 10 to 13 weeks to build a warrior, 6 days to unbuild one. Investment gap, airborne school is 21 days, ranger school is 63 days, transition is 6 days. Funding, TAP's total funding is approximately $140 million out of $19.5 billion in federal transition spending, roughly 0.7% of the budget. The cost, the suicide rate among veterans in the 12 months following separation was 37.8 per 100,000 in 2023, climbing steeply in the early months. A former Army officer with prior enlisted experience told military.com what every veteran already knew. TAP is really just a giant liability write-off for the military to be able to say, well, we gave you all these PowerPoint classes, you should be fine now. And when the weapon goes off, when the veteran spirals, when the marriage collapses, when the drinking starts, when the silence gets too loud, the system has its defence ready. We gave them the tools, we offered the programme, they were non-compliant, the file is clean, the box is checked, the veteran is on their own. The cost. When the system identifies a training deficiency in combat readiness, it builds entire schools, hires the best NCOs, funds the infrastructure, and measures outcomes obsessively. When it identifies a transition deficiency, one of its own data links to suicide, homelessness, and family dissolution, it builds a 3-day workshop, staffs it with contractors, funds it at 0.7% of the budget, and measures attendance instead of results. The system values the soldier. It does not value the veteran. The soldier is an asset. The veteran is an expense. And the transition between the two, the most psychologically dangerous passage in a service member's life, is treated not as a mission but as a formality. The cost of that formality is paid in the first year after separation, when the suicide rate among veterans peaks at 37.8 per 100,000. Climbing steeply in the early months, before most veterans have finished their first VA claim. If any military operation had a casualty rate this predictable and a response this inadequate, every commander in the chain would be relieved. But transition is not an operation, it is a process. And processes do not relieve commanders. They check boxes. You were not processed into the military. You were transformed. You should not be processed out of it either. But you are. And the people it fails, the ones who are struggling, spiralling, sitting in the dark, wondering what happened, are not non-compliant. They are under-equipped by design. Historical example, the asymmetry by design. The original TAP was authorised by Congress in 1990. For the first 20 years of its existence, participation was optional. The system that made basic training, weapons qualification, and every training event tied to readiness mandatory made the transition back to civilian life voluntary. It took the economic crisis of 2008 and visibly high veteran unemployment for Congress to pass the Vow to Hire Heroes Act of 2011, which finally made the DOL employment workshop mandatory. 21 years to decide that preparing people for civilian life was not a suggestion. The 2011 redesign rebuilt the curriculum, added counselling pathways, and created the tier system. By 2014, implementation was supposed to be complete. The GAO's review found the agencies could track participation, how many people showed up, but had no mechanism to evaluate whether the programme actually worked, counting asses in seats, not measuring outcomes. By 2025, the pattern had not changed. 65% of service members still do not start TAP on time. The GAO still recommends that the Department of War use its own data to evaluate outcomes, and the Department of War is still concurring with the recommendations while the machine grinds on. Meanwhile, 175,000 service members walk out the door every year.